Number 10. Bullseye. What do you do when you have a supervillain whose power is being able to hit practically any target? Well, you have him replace a superhero who can pretty much do the same. Bullseye, a mysterious assassin who we still don't even know the full name of beyond Lester Somebody, is most well known for frequently clashing with Daredevil and being under the employ of Kingpin. However, after using his sociopathic talents during the Skrull invasion and aiding the Thunderbolts, Bullseye was given the position of being a replacement Hawkeye, a position he kept threatening to lose as his murder sprees began drawing more and more attention to the villainous side of Osborn's Avengers team. Who knows, maybe we'll get a season 2 of the Disney Plus Hawkeye show and get to see an evil Hawkeye on screen after all.
Number 9. Toxie. Toxie is one of the worst there is out there. She is June Covington, a post-grad who was working at NYU and became obsessed with perfecting the human genetic code. She succeeded in doing so and aimed to use her research to fix a man who she found to be perfect except for a birth defect in his arm. In issue number 1 of Osborn, we learned that the man, Edward Wynn, would however refuse her help and attempt to have her imprisoned for her extreme research methods and basically eugenics-focused science. But she'd get back at him later on. Claiming to have changed her ways, she lured him to her lab, paralyzed him, and then left him trapped there to rot. Toxie ends up joining the Dark Avengers team following Norman Osborn's escape from the raft. She becomes the new Scarlet Witch of his team and also ends up romantically involved with Norman, despite initially showing disinterest in him the first time they met when she was drumming up money to fund her research.
Number 8. Ares. Tell me if you've heard this one before. The gods of one of mankind's most well-spread mythologies are actually advanced beings from their own unique pocket dimension, so powerful and advanced compared to the people of Earth that we can only qualify them as godlike. Well, this is the explanation given in the Marvel Universe for both the Greek and Norse gods, and perhaps that's why Norman Osborn was able to use them so interchangeably when searching for a replacement Thor. While the Greek god of war Ares had been on good terms with the Avengers before Osborn was placed in charge, he was one of the few superpowered beings who saw nothing wrong with the change in leadership and would go on to lead the Dark Avengers assault on Asgard. Asgard may be gone in the MCU already, but that doesn't mean I'm still not itching to see Thor and Loki take on another Pantheon's god. Bring it on, Marvel.
Number 7. Aya Peak. Aya Peak is one of the alternate darker versions of Spider-Man. Overall, a pretty deadly and cool character inspired by an actual worshipped and feared deity of the Mochi civilization, which flourished in northern Peru from the 1st to 8th century CE. Pretty neat stuff. Aya Peak ended up joining Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers team that was assembled after he escaped the raft. I think he'd be a cool character to have for his overall appearance. He has like snakes for hair, fangs, and a spider-like body with multiple limbs, but he'd also just be cool to act as an anti-Spider-Man, being literally a man, or well, god really, who is part spider but is known for his more cruel and violent approach. His name is really Aya Peak the Decapitator, so yeah. Also, what's up with Dark Avengers and gods? Apparently that's a thing.
Number 6. Scar. You might have heard that the Hulk briefly lived as a gladiator on the distant world of Sakaar, but did you know that in the comics he wound up actually having a son from this adventure? The offspring of the Hulk and Kyera the Old Strong, Scar's mother died so that he might live during the destruction of his planet, and eventually made his way back to Earth following in his father's footsteps. While initially seen as a threat by many of the world's heroes, Scar wound up being one of the few Dark Avengers to redeem himself. He was secretly a double agent for Steve Rogers all along, right under Norman Osborn's nose. The Hulk's always been one of my favorite characters in the MCU, and seeing him deal with father and son issues would bring a whole lot of drama to everyone's favorite universe, and I personally can't wait.
Number 5. Daken. I mean, we should probably get Wolverine and the rest of the mutant crew in the MCU first, but as soon as they are in, this is one of the people I want immediately thereafter. Daken is the son of Wolverine, who actually currently goes by his given name of Akihiro in the comics. Daken was actually a cruel nickname that Akihiro initially just adopted as his own. Daken in Japanese basically translates to cur or mongrel in English, and was used in reference to the fact that Akihiro was mixed race. His mother was a Japanese woman, Itsu, who was murdered before she could give birth to him, and his father was Wolverine, who believed that their unborn child had also been killed along with his wife, and therefore did not know that he'd actually been stolen and survived following Itsu's death, which was pretty awkward later. Daken was raised to hate his father and would grow up to become a villain and specifically an enemy to Wolverine. Norman would recruit Daken to become his stand-in Wolverine for his Dark Avengers team. which I love.
Number 4, Ragnarok. We've already had one Thor replacement on this list, but luckily the Dark Avengers were having a buy one get one free sale and threw in an evil cyborg clone as a bonus. Eventually going under the apocalyptic Norse moniker of Ragnarok, this clone was originally made by Tony Stark, based off a strand of hair that the billionaire stole after his first encounter with the Asgardian. During the events of Civil War, Tony unleashed this mad clone as a deterrent against the anti-registration side of the conflict, and received a ton of backlash when the clone wound up being more powerful than intended and eventually had to be destroyed by the god Hercules. Nevertheless, cyborg clones just don't die, and Ragnarok was given his new codename as a member of the Dark Avengers and lending muscle to Norman Osborn's new reign of terror. Could you imagine seeing this guy in the MCU? I'm sure Chris Hemsworth is down for playing double the roles, right?
Number 3, Moonstone. Moonstone is someone I've wanted for a while in the MCU. She's not only the Dark Avengers stand-in for Carol Danvers as their Miss Marvel, but has also been a member of the Thunderbolts as well. So it seems doubly likely that we'll get her eventually. Norman chose Carla Sofin to become his Miss Marvel after Carol refused to join Osborn's team. Carla also would become an antagonist to Carol herself, as well as having history with the Marvel name prior to that. I really am eager to see Captain Marvel and Moonstone face off in the MCU, so I'm really hoping that Carla does end up joining our new darker hero team that seems to be slowly forming. I can't wait.
Number 2, GARGAN. Spider-Man has had more than his fair share of animal-themed villains over the years, but few have had as many twists and turns in their persona as GARGAN, most commonly known as the Scorpion. Originally hired as a private investigator by J. Jonah Jameson to learn more about our beloved wall-crawler, Gargan's rivalry with the webhead ascended into supervillainry when he was paid $10,000 to undergo a procedure giving him all the proportional strength of, you guessed it, a scorpion. But that's far from the only name Gargan has gone under, as for a time he was also the host of the Venom symbiote, appearing much larger and more violent than the villain ever had before. This insane level of violence made it all the more worrying when Norman Osborn shrank down Gargan's symbiote so that he could more easily fit in as the Dark Avengers version of the beloved Spider-Man. Now, technically GARGAN has already appeared in Spider-Man Homecoming without any superpowers yet, but come on Marvel Studios, we need to see Nacho from Better Call Saul wearing a symbiote suit pronto.
Number 1, Iron Patriot. Yep, you maybe guessed it. Iron Patriot is probably one of my favorite Dark Avengers around and is also our number 1 spot. He also happens to be both the leader of the team and of Hammer, the organization behind the Dark Avengers. That's right, Iron Patriot is none other than Norman Osborn, who stands in as a version of the Avengers' Iron Man. Of course, he is much more sinister and obsessive than any version of Tony could ever be. And sadly, he also kind of ruined the Iron Patriot name. Poor Rhodey. Norman as Iron Patriot is not only a team member, but is also the one who ultimately decides who he wants on his team, recruiting other villains and turning them into alternate versions of superheroes. I also just selfishly want Norman Osborn in the MCU for Spider-Man because he's such a great villain overall for Spidey, but then again, he also has proven himself as a great villain just overall in the comics, so to see him as like a big bad would also be pretty cool.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Hawkeye. As funny as it might sound to put Hawkeye first on a list about dangerous Avengers members, he's not to be messed with. And in the MCU, Hawkeye's had it pretty rough. He had his mind controlled in the first Avengers, he took out eyeballs for Loki, yuck. And then he comes out of retirement for like 2 hours, comes Civil War, and then he gets arrested and sent to the Raft. And then his family disappears. So we catch up with Clint 5 years after Thanos snapped his dirty fingers, and we find him in Tokyo, and he's not the same guy that we once knew at all. He's taken out criminals, this time he's doing it the hard way, and he's suited up as a different character altogether. He's back this time as Ronin. And this is a dark time. He takes out so many people, and he takes them out violently as well. He uses his skills to do it in such a brutal assassin way. I mean, I know you're upset because your entire family disappeared while you were eating hot dogs with mayo. That's fair, but so was the rest of the world, okay? They were affected too. Stick to the arrow, leave the hood and the sword down. Stay Hawkeye, stay nice. And before we continue on with this list of dangerous Avenger members, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would mean a lot. It helps this channel out so much. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Now let's get right back into this list. Number 9, Bucky Barnes. Near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane while taking down Baron Zemo. Now the bomb went off, hurling Steve and Bucky into the freezing waters, and well, as for Cap, you know his story. He remained frozen, came back out of the ice years later, still mentally and physical at his peak, but this wasn't the case for Bucky. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing between the English Channel, so they scooped him up, made him a fancy new metal arm, brainwashed him, and turned him into a brutal assassin with the help of Hydra's own super soldier serum. He joined the Avengers officially in the New Avengers issue 48. Now, Bucky is of course considered an Avenger now in the MCU, but during the Civil War storyline, we saw just how brutal he could be as an assassin. He took out all of the Avengers once he broke out with Zemo's help. Number 8, Sentry. He made his first appearance in Sentry issue 1. Meet Robert Reynolds. He was a struggling addict who made his way into a laboratory and discovered something called the Golden Sentry Serum. And then he got the surprise of a lifetime when he was given the power of 1 million exploding suns. Now that plus a homemade costume equals superhero. Sounds pretty good. But he's a quite dangerous superhero. I mean, of course, the whole million sun thing. Robert fought alongside the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and then of course, the New Avengers. Things changed for Robert when Norman Osborn decided to put together a team of his own. This was the Dark Avengers, where he made the switch. Sentry's a pretty powerful being as well. I mean, he was once a horseman of death, where he even considered himself as the heir to Apocalypse, so he's up there. Number 7, Wolverine. James Howlett, a Canadian mutant and popular member of the X-Men who we all should know by now. He describes himself as being the best at what he does, but what he does isn't very nice. He has an accelerated healing factor, sharp senses, sharp claws, and of course the adamantium coating on his bones thanks to the Weapon X program. So the claws are what make Logan unique. He is a fierce, brutal warrior with them, and he has the rage of a beast and the soul of a samurai. Put that all together and you have quite a fierce Avenger. He joined the Avengers in New Avengers issue 6. He obtains the Muramasa blade, and so begins his quest for revenge. He's pretty dangerous too, the whole healing factor, the rage, his memories coming and going. I'm really hoping that with Deadpool 3 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, now that Marvel has him back, I really hope we can see the Avengers recruit these mutants on the big screen as well. It'd be fun to see them together. After all, Deadpool 3 was supposed to be a road trip with them too as well, so we got to see somewhat of a version of that. Number 6, Mockingbird. Barbara Morse made her comic book debut in Astonishing Tales issue 12. She studied at Georgia Institute of Technology, specializing in biology, and she worked with Dr. Wilma Calvin on Project Gladiator. Now the project was set to recreate the super soldier serum that created Captain America. Everybody was trying this. It worked and failed multiple times. But during this time, S.H.I.E.L.D. trained Bobby to be a spy. They also gave her the cool nickname of Agent 19. I mean, yeah, she was so good at gymnastics and flips, it would be stupid not to make her a superhero at this point. So she became Mockingbird in the 80s with Marvel Team Up issue 95. In 2011, she became a super soldier in New Avengers 13, so she finally has powers. When she was on the verge of dying, she was injected with this other version of the serum, and it saved her, thankfully. But it of course also gave her new super soldier abilities. She's skilled in hand-to-hand combat, like Kung Fu and Taekwondo, and she's known to be pretty dangerous when fighting in close quarters. Of course, being familiar in weaponry as well. She was one of the founding members of the West Coast Avengers, but she also was part of the New Avengers and the Secret Avengers as well. So she's been around for quite a bit. Fans actually got their hope up that Barbara would appear in the MCU. They actually thought Erin Kellyman was Mockingbird, but alas, she was revealed to be Flag Smasher, or leader of the Flag Smashers in the MCU. Number 5, She-Hulk. Jennifer Walters made her comic book debut in Savage She-Hulk issue 1. She's a brilliant lawyer who just happened to be the cousin of Bruce Banner. So when she was shot by Nicholas Trask, yeah, she was shot while she was defending a criminal who had been double-crossed by Trask. And she was also spreading rumors that she had enough evidence to lock away Trask, so he lashed out and shot her. So now, in order to save her life, a blood transfusion was required from none other than her family, the Hulk himself. She joined the Avengers in issue 221. Now, what makes Jen Walters stand out as a Hulk is that she's able to control her abilities, unlike Bruce. Tatiana Mason Lee is actually set to play the powerful Avenger in Disney's upcoming She-Hulk, set to release in 2022, and I can't wait to see how powerful she is on the big screen as well. Number 4, US Agent. John Walker, perhaps one of the most dangerous members to ever join the Avengers ranks. We're seeing this unfold currently in the MCU in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So this war hero in the show was nominated to become the replacement of Steve Rogers, and this happened in the comics as well. This happened when Steve Rogers had to abandon his identity due to the Red Skull's manipulation of the Commission on Superhuman Activities. So somebody had to suit up, so the government needed this new figure, and in issue 333 of Captain America, titled The Replacement, we saw just who that was. He took on the role of Captain America briefly, but after he left, he returned again, but this time in his own version of a blacked out Captain America suit, and the shield is also less spangly. He comes back as US agent and he's put to the test. He's forced to battle an Ironmonger and he wants to take it down alone because, you know, he's cool. The shield seems to work out for him pretty well, and in the comics, it was actually Taskmaster who trained him how to properly use that shield, who we have yet to see in the MCU because Black Widow is still delayed. Now yes, eventually he did join the Avengers. In West Coast Avengers issue 45, the government wanted an official in there to make sure all was running smoothly, so they sent in John Walker. I feel like the finale for Falcon and the Winter Soldier is going to be the introduction of the Thunderbolts, and I really hope US Agent joins a version of the Dark Avengers, because he's an amazing actor. I'm not quite done with him yet. Number 3, Quicksilver. The twin brother of Wanda Maximoff. I figured it was a great time to mention this speedy Avenger. Pietro Maximoff is the twin brother of Wanda, and in Avengers West Coast issue 57, he joined the team. Now, Pietro had been trouble for the team for a while now. I mean, he convinced Wanda to do what she did in the House of M storyline. He's framed the Avengers for treason at one point, and he was fully okay with exposing his daughter Luna to Terrigen. He's kind of the worst. That's actually how Luna got her abilities, but still, bad parenting 101. In West Coast Avengers issue 33, Magneto's bloodline got the best of him, and he got fellow Avengers captured by the communist gang. Even in the MCU, Quicksilver was first introduced as a villain. He and Wanda were actually both Team Hydra in the start. Now his super speed is not to be toyed with. He's quite powerful. In Marvel Zombies, Quicksilver gets tricked by Mystique, he gets bit, and then with his incredible speed powers, he's able to turn everybody into zombies all around the world within minutes. The situation went from bad to unstoppable thanks to Quicksilver. Number 2, Scarlet Witch. She's a daughter of Magneto and the twin brother of Quicksilver, who I just mentioned, so now's a pretty good time to mention her as well. She was on her father's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but most of us would consider Wanda one of the strongest Avengers. She's one of the biggest Marvel characters ever, and during those events of M-Day, she spoke 3 words: no more mutants. And just like that, a mass amount of mutants were depowered, or worse. Now that large number was 986,000, so only leaving a couple hundred left. In the MCU as well, we just watched Wanda go through quite the trauma. In WandaVision, we saw this over the course of 9 weeks, where she had a mental breakdown kind of similar to M-Day, and she trapped Westview in her hex. Now, of course, by the end of the show, she frees everybody and things look pretty back to normal-ish, but with that after-credit scene of her studying the Darkhold, and with the given knowledge that Wanda is in the next Doctor Strange movie, I feel like we've only scratched the surface of the Scarlet Witch's true abilities. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Vision. Of course, Wanda's hubby, android hubby. The Vision is an advanced android to say the least. I mean, he came back from the dead in WandaVision and now he's matching his West Coast Avengers look more than ever, that all-white android look. He was first introduced in Avengers issue 57, created by Ultron using parts of the original Human Torch and the mind of Wonder Man. A little different than the MCU. He then turned on his original creator and joined the Avengers. In the MCU, he's created for Ultron's new body, but with the addition of the Mind Stone and a little bit of Jarvis, we now have this android Avenger. But during the Secret Empire storyline, Vision was part of Hydra's Avengers when they were taking over the world. He used an AI virus to take him over, he being Arnim Zola. A robot gone rogue is quite compelling, especially when he's as strong as the Vision. In the first issue, he's put to the test when the other Avengers are fighting him. He's easily able to take them all on. As long as he's on the good side, we should be okay. Otherwise, it's just gonna be a hot mess. Number 10, Scarlet Witch. So many of us like to see the Scarlet Witch as this misunderstood magic user that is just looking for love. Well, she used to be one of the original members of the Brotherhood of Evil. She was teamed up with Magneto right from the start, and for years she thought her powers were only mutant powers. I mean, it made sense her brother Quicksilver was a mutant and the two of them were both working for Magneto. He was a mutant and everybody they were fighting was also a mutant. But after Scarlet Witch and her brother decided to part ways from the Brotherhood, they would decide that they needed to start using their powers for good and join the Avengers. It's wild how in comic books you can go from domestic terrorist to hero like that fast. It's incredible. But even after Scarlet Witch would decide to be a hero, it wouldn't be the last time she would do something to hinder nearly every hero in the world. And of course, I'm referring to the infamous M-Day would have Scarlet Witch use her powers to rewrite reality and see it to that the mutants are nearly extinct. This was partly caused by her relationship with Magneto, who's her dad, and a very not great dad, I can also say. And before we go to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video because it does go a long way for our channel. Helps us out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Now back to some Avengers who used to be villains. Number 9, Wonder Man. It's hard to know in the Marvel Universe when you're being tricked because everyone has got a plan up their sleeve, even the good guys. But if you're working with a tactical Baron von Zemo, then you better believe that he's doing something dirty behind the scenes. See, Wonder Man used to just be a regular working class man. Actually, his story is nearly identical to that of the Vulture in the MCU. He's a working man. Stark puts him out of the business, and then he has to do whatever he can to try and make ends meet. So eventually he's given the option to use advanced tech to get back at the people who wronged him, and he loves the idea of that. I mean, I'm kind of on board with that too. Let's do it. That opportunity would come back when Baron von Zemo would approach him with a proposition. He would give Wonder Man, who was then just Simon Williams, the power of ionic energy so he could have the power to crush Iron Man. But partway through, his anger faded and he decided that taking on Iron Man wasn't the answer after all. So the two of them turned on Baron von Zemo. But here's the catch. The Baron isn't going to get caught with his pants down. He had Poison Williams, who would soon die after. So his hero life was short-lived because once you die in comics, you are dead forever. Moment of silence. Only for a bit, because he came back later on. Yeah, he came back. He was brought from the dead and is now a registered member of the Avengers. So, welcome back. Number 8, The Winter Soldier. You should know the story of the Winter Soldier by now. If you've not seen that movie yet, please go check it out because it's arguably the best movie in the MCU. And the story of the Winter Soldier has more flip-flops than a beach in Florida. The Winter Soldier was formerly Bucky Barnes, the best friend and right-hand man of Captain America. A tragic accident would have him fall to his death, or so Steve Rogers thought. It turns out Hydra got a hold of him and used some experimental tech to not only give him one of the most badass robotic arms that I've ever seen, but they also brainwashed him to be a living weapon. They used his advanced war training and then embedded him with Hydra assassination techniques. He was then frozen over and over again, only to be thawed out when Hydra needed to send him out to kill somebody. But eventually he would cross paths with Steve Rogers and the old memories would come flooding back to him. He would fight back against his Hydra programming and turn to become a good guy, even if he had to fight Iron Man to do it. Number 7, Hawkeye. Man, to think that one of the main members of the MCU used to be a bad guy, I mean, like, it's not that hard to believe now, but when you see him break down in Avengers Endgame and start chasing down gangs in Tokyo, then it all starts to make sense how this guy can have a dark side. But the first couple of times that we see Hawkeye show up, he was working with Black Widow, someone who actually we'll be mentioning later on this list. She would get him to tag along on missions where the two of them had to take down the flying tin can man known as Iron Man. But there wasn't enough hate in Hawkeye's heart to keep him on the dark side, and he eventually swapped over to work with the heroes, and since then, he hasn't looked back. Number 6, Loki. Now, never an official member of the Avengers, I mean, he didn't stand with them when every hero in the MCU teamed up to storm Thanos' army and save the universe, but he did some of the most heroic acts that set everything up so the Avengers could save the day. He summoned Surtur so that he could take out Hela. He teamed up with Thor to save the people of Asgard, and he even threw his life on the line to try and kill Thanos. The guy's time as a hero is pretty short-lived, but he did come through when it counted, and I think the Avengers will look back at him as one of the most heroic members of them all. Just saying. Number 5, Red Hulk. I really love the Hulk's villains. I mean, you have the leader, which kind of represents the opposite of the Hulk, all brains with very little brawn. But then so many of his other villains are just like him, but slightly different, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Let's just get 2 cannonballs and fire them at each other and see what happens. Boom. The results are usually pretty explosive. Well, if you didn't know, Red Hulk is the general who always wanted the Hulk dead. Thaddeus Ross. I guess he went down the if you can't beat him, join him line, thinking that when it came to taking out the big green beast, he was actually able to keep his identity a secret, but once it was finally revealed who he was, it would be Captain America that would team up with him. With the two of them having a military background, it kind of made sense. It also made sense for the Red Hulk to become a hero. I mean, Thaddeus wasn't that far off in his quest to stop the Hulk, even though the big green beast is a force for good most of the time. He would be seen as a threat to everybody else around him. And Thaddeus seemed to have better control over his version of the Hulk than Bruce ever did. Number 4, Namor. It doesn't matter what comic book universe you're in, you gotta have a fish dude. That's just a staple of how everything works, that's it. And for the Marvel Universe, we of course have Namor. The Submariner, he was actually one of the original villains in Marvel. The dude's pretty old, with his first comic coming out in 1939. He's the ruler of Atlantis, and he didn't like the way things were handled on the surface, so he decided to duke it out with the people walking on land. Turns out that he wasn't a match for the people on the surface, so he decided to join them. He would eventually team up with the Avengers, but even though he was now fighting side by side with them, he's always had a superiority complex when it comes to dealing with surface-dwelling super people. And even though the Avengers saw him as an ally, when push came to shove, he would ditch them and team with the X-Men to try and take down the Avengers. He even flooded Wakanda, which seems like a bit of an overreaction. He's always had a sore spot when it comes to the Black Panther. I think maybe it's because he hates seeing a surface civilian as advanced as Atlanteans. Could be. Number 3, Vision. Even though the MCU will have you thinking that Vision was made by the Avengers to take out Ultron, it was really the other way around. Hank Pym's least favorite kid would make the android as a tool to take out the Avengers. I guess he didn't feel like getting his hands dirty that day. Okay. Well, he should have done a better job at programming the damn thing, because while fighting the Avengers, Vision decides to swap sides and teaming up with the good guys, which in the end seems to be the worst possible thing that could happen for Ultron. You build something to kill the Avengers, but then it turns on you, and then the Avengers are now stronger, but then all the secrets that this machine knows about you will be leaked to them. But now Vision has become one of the most famous members of the Avengers, with him and Wanda starring in the new WandaVision TV show on Disney+. And don't worry if you haven't gotten around to watching that yet. I'm not going to ruin anything for you, but you definitely should go and watch it right now. We're only 3 episodes in, so you got time to catch up before it ends. Plenty of time. Number 2, Black Widow. I mean, her name is Black Widow, so I mean, that's not usually how heroes are named unless they're an anti-hero, like the Punisher, you know? It should be no surprise that she's super sneaky, and she actually used to be one of Iron Man's greatest villains. The Black Widow started out as an agent sent over from Russia to bring down one of the founding members of the Avengers. It's kind of weird to think that in Marvel universes that would be developed down the line, she would be one of the founding members. Awesome. But the villain was just so popular that nobody wanted to see her go. And after the Cold War ended, the story of a Russian agent that was sent over to dismantle a part of America that everybody loved just wasn't as compelling as it once was. And number 1, Doctor Doom. Now I know this is only for a limited time, but it's still so wild that it deserves a spot on this list, a very high spot on this list. We're talking about the same Doctor Doom that once was ruling Battleworld, the same Doctor Doom that stole Odin's powers, the same guy. He's one of the biggest, baddest villains that gives Thanos a run for his money with the amount of schemes that he's pulled. Well, there was a time when Victor Von Doom suffered a pretty serious blow to the head, an injury that would take out most people, but we're not talking about most people, are we? Valeria came through to fix up Doom's brain, and not long after that, he was working with the good guys. Right around this time, Tony was in a deep coma, so someone needs to step in the role of Iron Man. And who better than Doctor Doom himself? Having Doom become Iron Man for that brief moment was one of the coolest moments ever, hands down.
Number 10, Deadpool. If you talk to Wade, he'd consider himself a member, or at the very least former member, of the X-Men. He'd be wrong, but that's how he would likely see it, so for that I'm gonna count him. And there was a time, however, when he did at least appear to hold a probationary status with them, when Cyclops thought it might be better to keep a closer eye on Wilson, who wanted to join up at the time, rather than let him besmirch the name of mutants everywhere with his unchecked actions. That of course didn't last very long, but he has also been a member of the mutant team X-Force. When it comes to joining the Avengers, he's been on a few different Avengers teams. One of his most recent appearances was when he joined Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel's War Avengers in War of the Realms. He's also been a member of Steve Rogers' Captain America's all-new, all-different Avengers, and I don't really know how much more Avengery it gets than serving under Captain America. Avengery, is that a word? It's not, but it is now. Number 9, Kid Omega. Some people don't like to count the West Coast Avengers, but I certainly do. They're just so fun. Of course, one of the recruits on this team is none other than fan favorite Kid Omega, aka Quentin Quire, the character who has a habit of dying repeatedly on Krakoa currently as part of the Dawn of X line. Kid Omega joined up with Kate Bishop's West Coast Avengers at the beginning of Kelly Thompson's run in 2018. This run, by the way, is just wacky and delightful, and if you have yet to check it out yet, I highly recommend it. Number 8, Cannonball. Cannonball was recruited to the Avengers after the events of Avengers vs. X-Men. Captain America felt during those events the Avengers had in a way let their mutant friends down and could have done more to help them. In an attempt to move past this former conflict and foster more community and trust between the two superhero groups, he recruited Cannonball along with Sunspot to join the Avengers. I always feel like Sunspot makes more of a splash, so I thought it might be nice to also acknowledge Sam's appearance here as a character and often underrated mutant hero. Sam has not only worked alongside the X-Men team, but is also one of the founding members of the New Mutants team as well. Ka-ching! Number 7, X-23. While Laura Kinney may not have been part of the main Avengers team, she was part of the Avengers Academy. She joined up after the events of Fear itself, and during her time there bested Tigra in a sparring match, proving even more so that X-23 would make a deadly addition to the Avengers team someday, should they ever want to recruit her on a more permanent level. X-23, currently known as Wolverine, is a genetic female clone of Logan, created using his genetic material and that of her own creator and birth mother, Sarah Kinney. Laura was raised to be a killing machine, a skillful trained assassin, but ended up escaping the facility and company who raised and used her. Since finding Logan, her genetic father in a way, and the X-Men, she has served on multiple different heroic mutant teams. Number 6. Havok. Havok was one of the members of the Uncanny Avengers, composed of a weird mishmash of characters, mutants and non-mutants alike, who initially united to take down the superpowered Red Skull, now armed with the mind of Charles Xavier. Havok joined the team in the first issue of the series, despite being a conflicting character when it came to his usually unstable alignment. Havok has been on both sides of the spectrum, being a hero at times and a villain at others, and sometimes he just gets lost in between the two labels, like he appears to be currently in the comics, on the brink of almost losing his sanity. Poor Havok. Honestly, so much terrible things have happened to Alex, and I just feel really bad for him. His time starting out with the X-Men was also initially pretty traumatic during the time he spent avoiding joining Xavier's school or team. However, eventually he did end up acquiescing and joining them, happy there for a time before Madeline Pryor came around and, well, corrupted him. Number 5. Magneto. For those who think Magneto is just an evil mutant who is more an enemy to the X-Men, he has also spent quite a bit of time working alongside them as well. Most notably, Magneto was actually a leader of the New Mutants team while working alongside the X-Men. Despite the fact that he and Charles haven't always seen eye to eye, even Professor X knows that Eric can be a powerful ally. So, how did he make his way onto the Avengers? Well, this of course happened during the Axis event. After many major heroes had their alignments inverted, Magneto was one of the superpowered now heroes to be recruited into that temporary, technically non-official Avengers team. Number 4. Rogue. Rogue joined the Uncanny Avengers in issue number 4 of the 2012 series. She would become the field leader for the Avengers Unity Division. She was first approached by Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, who asked her to stick around on the team after Rogue helped them out in issue 4. This was also the same issue that Scarlet Witch joined, and of course was after both the events of M-Day and after Wanda had just been used as a pawn by Red Skull, who at this point was immensely powerful after stealing Xavier's brain and gaining his immense psionic power. Super comics, I know, stealing someone's brain, but here we are. So there was a lot of tension between these two women, but Rogue ultimately did decide to stay on the team. Now, not because Wanda asked her to though, and because she wanted to move on, but because she knew it would be what Professor X would have wanted, and because she basically didn't trust Wanda or her powers and wanted to stick around to keep an eye on her and to prevent her from making a giant mess of this whole situation, which she felt was all Wanda really knew how to do. Ouch. Poor Wanda, she can never catch a break. Number 3. Storm. Storm actually joined up after my number 2 was on the team. We'll talk about them in a minute, no spoilers, but see if you can guess based on this timing who is going to be next. Storm ended up joining during Bendis' run on Avengers in 2012 in issue 19 on that run. She was actually recommended to the team when Captain America attempted to re-recruit Black Panther. Now Black Panther said he just wasn't interested at the time, he just wasn't feeling it, and when Cap explained his reason for needing Black Panther as wanting friendly faces, T'Challa told him that what he thought the team needed actually was just more firepower. What Cap needed in his opinion was his wife, Storm. And so Storm answered the call, ended up joining the team for a time. She was even prominently featured on the cover for issue 21. I love this cover, it's just so cool. I think Storm should be on every team. Storm should lead every team, that's what I think. Number 2. Wolverine. Wolverine has been part of both the main Avengers team and the Avengers Unity Division. Being as popular as a member of the X-Men as he is, I'm actually surprised it took Marvel as long as it did to include him on the team after the Avengers became this sort of ever-expanding team that just had so many branches and card-carrying former members as well as rotating members and honorary members. It just has become There's a lot of Avengers. Wolverine was invited to officially join the Avengers in the 2005 New Avengers series in issue number 6, after Cap and Iron Man had a brief discussion about whether or not Wolverine would be a suitable pick for the team. Steve was concerned that Wolverine was a murderer and therefore not suited, but Tony insisted, saying that he was their missing ingredient, the thing that their new team needed. And also he was like, he's not a murderer, he's a samurai. Or maybe a murderer and a samurai. I think you can be both. I don't know, can you be both? Is that dishonorable? Apologies to any samurai watching this. Number 1. Beast. We've seen Beast featured on the Secret Avengers team, but like me, you may have forgotten that he is essentially a core member of the Avengers, first becoming a probationary member in the Avengers Volume 1 in issue 137, and then gaining full membership in issue 151. Beast was likely the first X-Men member to become a full member of the main team, and although I tend to forget about it because he goes just so far back, he's essentially a core member, or he was a core member for quite a while. If you're wondering how exactly Beast ended up on the Avengers team when the X-Men and Hank's ties to them are so prominent, it was actually just some good timing in terms of what was going on in the comics. X-Men's original run actually ended in 1970 due to the series being cancelled. X-Men would return, but not until the mid-70s. Issue 137 of the Avengers, featuring Beast as a new member on probation, came out in July of 1975. For Hank, this was just after he'd been transformed into the big, bouncing blue beast that we have come to love today. X-Men returned a few months later in August, with Chris Claremont starting his run in issue 94 of X-Men. In other words, the X-Men team being defunct provided some freedom for Beast to join the Avengers, and writers kinda just liked the idea of him working on the team and probably just also loved his look, so it happened. And there was no X-Men at the time, so made sense.